It's loud in Russia again. Over the past few days, a series of powerful explosions have gone off in several regions at once, from Russia's Stavropol to Ukraine's temporarily occupied Crimea. The defense forces are striking Russia's oil refining and military-industrial infrastructure, targets that supply its army with fuel, as well as ammunition and drone parts. Daniel Diomin has been studying the chronology of the explosions.
Oh, it exploded.
God damn it, just...
On the night of November 11th, Defense Forces units struck the Saratov oil refinery. Explosions rocked the facility, which produces more than 20 types of petroleum products, from gasoline and diesel to fuel oil and vacuum gas oil. A fire broke out afterwards. The plant is a key link in supplying fuel to the occupying forces.
As part of efforts to reduce the military and economic potential of the Russian aggressor, Defense Forces units struck the Saratov oil refineries. A series of explosions was recorded. Afterwards, a massive fire was observed in the target area.
They're calling in the Batman signal.
At the same time, a strike also hit the marine oil terminal in temporarily occupied Feodosia, the main maritime hub for supplying fuel and lubricants to the annexed peninsula in the temporarily occupied territory of southern Ukraine. Reports indicate that the tanks on the terminal's territory were hit. In addition, in the temporarily occupied territory of Donetsk region, drones struck a logistics warehouse in Donetsk and a concentration of personnel near Okaratin.
A logistics warehouse in Donetsk and a gathering of personnel near Okaratin were hit. The strike UAVs hit their targets.
Drone! Unbelievable!
The next day, Defense Forces struck the Orsk oil refinery in Orenburg region. A fire broke out there. One of the main oil refining units was damaged.
The plant produces more than 30 types of petroleum products, gasoline, diesel fuel, aviation gas, lubricants, and more. It is designed to process 6.6 million tons of oil per year. It is involved in supplying the Russian occupation army.
On November 12th, Ukrainian forces struck the Stavrolin enterprise in Budyonovsk, Stavropol Krai. This is one of the largest polymer producers in Russia, whose products are used in armored vehicles, drones, and insulation systems for military machines.
The plant has a full cycle of hydrocarbon raw material processing and produces polymers for the manufacture of composite materials, body parts, seals, and insulation for various types of equipment used by the Russian army. Among other things, it also produces components for UAVs.
The Russian Ministry of Defense stated that on that night, 22 Ukrainian UAVs were shot down, 4 of them specifically over the Stavropol region. In Donetsk region, in the temporarily occupied Novy Svit, the defense forces struck a large ammunition depot. It detonated. The explosions could be heard several kilometers away.
The defense forces continue to take all measures to undermine the military economic potential of the Russian occupiers and force the Russian Federation to stop its armed aggression against Ukraine. From
our runway, they launch missiles as they go.
Here it is.
On the night of November 13th, explosions occurred in temporarily occupied Crimea. In Feodosia, an oil depot caught fire, near which Russian telegram channels reported the closure of a railway crossing. Saratov, Orsk, Budyonovsk, Feodosia, Novy Svet. Every day more hotspots appear on the map of Russia and the occupied territories. Ukrainian UAVs are increasingly striking deep behind enemy lines, undermining their ability to fight and supply the front.
The Russian oil industry is under a double blow. On one hand, oil producers are forced to look for new buyers because previous importers are refusing deliveries due to US sanctions. At the same time, on the domestic market, it is impossible to process the oil. The largest Russian refineries are simply shut down after attacks by Ukrainian drones. This is one of the deepest crises in the industry, which brings in about a quarter of the federal budget's revenue. My colleague Larisa Petruk will continue on this topic. On the
night of November 11th, Ukrainian Defense Forces once again attacked the Saratov oil refinery. The plant produces gasoline and fuel oil, diesel fuel, technical sulfur, and also supplies its products to the Russian army. After a series of explosions, a large fire broke out at the facility. In all likelihood, this is already the 5th attack on the Saratov oil refinery since the beginning of autumn. Previously, it was struck on November 3rd, October 16th, September 20th, and September 16th. The Saratov refinery specializes in the production of gasoline, diesel fuel, fuel oil, and more than 20 other types of petroleum products. From a Deutsche Welle publication. On November 11th, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine also confirmed the strike on the oil refinery in the Orenburg region. This facility produces more than 30 types of petroleum products, including gasoline, diesel fuel, aviation kerosene, and oils. According to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, the plant's design processing capacity is over 6.5 million tons of oil per year. However, the geography of Ukrainian strikes was not limited to Saratov and Orenburg. The Feodosia Oil Marine Terminal in Crimea was also hit, a key hub for supplying fuel and lubricants by sea to the Crimean Peninsula and the temporarily occupied territories in southern Ukraine. There were confirmed strikes on storage tanks at the facility. The extent of the damage caused is being clarified. In addition, in the temporarily occupied territory of Donetsk region, a logistics supply warehouse of the Russian occupiers in Donetsk and a concentration of personnel near Ocheratyne were hit. From reports of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on Telegram. Now practically every day. At present, Ukraine is effectively using its long-range sanctions against Russia on a daily basis. And every day we have a clear result in the form of reduced Russian capabilities. Russia must lose, and this is truly a peacekeeping tactic. I want to thank everyone who is working to provide Ukraine with these capabilities, and of course our warriors for their accuracy. The long-range strikes by the Ukrainian armed forces have several negative consequences for Russia at once. First, the aggressor's army is deprived of an important resource, fuel, without which it is impossible to conduct active military operations. Second, the crisis intensifies both within the Federation itself and in the Ukrainian territories temporarily occupied by Russia. And combined with inflation, this leads to a rapid increase in prices.
Gasoline continues to become more expensive at record rates, 0.8. Almost a 1% increase per week, and this has been going on for several weeks now, 11% since the beginning of the year. So the government is frantically trying to take some measures to keep gasoline prices in check. There is a significant, very significant loss of capacity for gasoline, and partly for primary processing and diesel production as well, all these prices. They keep rising and there's no end in sight.
What cannot be processed domestically is becoming increasingly difficult for the Kremlin to sell abroad. American sanctions are distancing Moscow from its last remaining partners, Beijing and New Delhi. US sanctions have already slashed Russian oil exports by sea by about 20%. For example, in October, around 3.6 million barrels were shipped daily from Russian ports. 1,000 barrels of oil, but in just the first week after the sanctions were announced, according to Bloomberg, these volumes dropped to about 3 million barrels per day. And things could get even worse. 5 Indian refineries, which together accounted for about 65% of Russia's seaborne oil exports to India, have already put their planned December oil purchases on hold. At the same time, it's impossible to sell the oil on the global market, and within Russia, there's nowhere left to process it because Ukrainian drones have bombed the largest refinery. From a publication by Novaya Gazeta Europe, strikes on oil refineries have caused Russia more damage than international sanctions, according to Kirilo Budanov, head of the main intelligence directorate of Ukraine's Ministry of Defense. According to various estimates, the damage to the aggressor country has already exceeded $100 billion.